Hi, and welcome back to the Miami Real Estate Podcast. I'm your host, Omar DeWint, Communications Executive here at Cervera Real Estate, welcoming you back to the launch of Season 2 of the Miami Real Estate Podcast. We're really excited today. We're kicking off the show with two very special guests, helping us break down the highly buzzed about and talked about ISG World Report 2019, which just debuted about a week or two ago at fabulous Brickell City Center. Here for that conversation, we have the one and only Craig Studnicky, principal of ISG World, and Alicia Cervera Lamadrid, managing partner of Cervera Real Estate. So, Craig, Alicia, thanks for coming.
Thank you, Omar.
Thanks for having us. Very exciting.
Excited to be back. You know, we're dusting off the old podcast mics and getting the show off the ground. So we couldn't think of a better topic to do that with than breaking down the report. So I guess to start, Craig, why don't you, fabulous presentation, by the way, a couple weeks ago.
Thanks.
You had
Thanks. It was actually a week ago.
Was it a week ago?
Yeah.
Time flies.
It's amazing. It's amazing how fast time goes.
Yeah. So 1 week ago, we had an amazing presentation, which you delivered. But before we get into the main takeaways and sort of what we like to do best here on the podcast, sort of connecting the dots on the data that's out there, before we get into the report, if you could sort of walk us through the history and the origins of the Miami report and sort of how we got to today.
Sure. I'll try to make it as brief as I can. But Alicia and I both had the same issue in 2008 and 2009. I think I referred to 2008 last Wednesday as our 1929. It was an absolute disaster. And there were publications like the New York Times and CNN that picked on Miami and said we had about 10 years of defaulted inventory to sell. Well, of all of the competitors that I go up against in Miami, there's nobody that I regard more highly than Alicia Cervera. She's incredibly intelligent. She loves Miami like nobody I know. And despite all of her talents, I know she had the same headwinds I was confronted with. How do you instill a sense of urgency, not just in your sales agents, but also in the buyers, when publications like CNN and the New York Times are saying what they're saying? We're not that important. So, oh my God, what are we going to do? So we simply said to ourselves, this doesn't make any sense because we live here and it just doesn't seem like there's that much out there. Yes, we know there were a lot of defaults. We know a lot of buyers walked away from 20% deposits left and right because the world was in a really weird place. But 10 years of inventory or some 22,000 units? No way. So we simply went out and we counted. Building, neighborhood by neighborhood, building by building, the old-fashioned way. We didn't write some algorithm. We just literally went out and counted. And I would call developers up and I would ask them, how many units do you really have? And they would really tell me. And because we've been here a while, we can call developers and they'll answer honestly. So I think the first Miami report was like 4 or 5 pages, and we just summarized everything that was really out there. There wasn't 22,000 units, there were 11,000 or so. My sales agents asked us if we could print it in Espanol, which we did as well. And then a year later, they asked us for a follow-up. So the second year, and by the way, it was amazing because by the second year, 10 years of inventory turned into maybe 1 year left. It was, Everybody was buying like crazy because prices were very low. The South American economies were doing extremely well, particularly Brazil. There was no mortgage financing, but it just didn't matter. They came up here with cash and they bought everything.
Right, the dollar was low.
Very low.
Yeah.
The exact opposite of what we're dealing with now, because I think it was back in 2008, God, when Standard & Poor's reduced the credit rating of the U.S. from AAA to AA, oh, God, we didn't know where that was going to wind up. But it did lower the value of the dollar. But on the other hand, it encouraged South America to come up and buy real estate in the city that they so love. By year 2, I was encouraged to do like the second edition because real estate was absorbing. My sales agents were very happy, brokers were very happy, and the buyers that were buying were very happy. I didn't know it would become a thing where we're producing this now once a year. But to answer your question, the origin came out of the old cliche, necessity is the mother of invention. I needed to do something to motivate my sales agents. So I thought of the Miami report, and because nothing motivates people, in my opinion, and I think Alicia would agree, like facts, like real information. And that's what we tried to present.
Yeah, and it was an awesome thing because it helped us take control over our own destiny. I think other people have access to a lot of data. Ron Sheffield is certainly a guy who's a true professional with EWM and has a lot of access to data, but it's not pre-construction data. Correct. The DDD did a great job putting together a report, but it was only on part of the city. Mm-hmm. And you all really took that bull by the horns and focused in on the part of the industry that's really the tip of the arrow for not only for us and what we do, but for the city. and for the catalyst that really makes Miami expand and expand in a healthy fashion. And I think the other thing that's great about the report is that it's framed in a way that people understand. You know, it's not some hyperbole that nobody knows what anybody's talking about, but rather this is framed in a way that people understand it, as the DDA has done as well.
Yeah.
So that you're not talking, you know, something that's planned is a pipe dream. Maybe it happens, maybe it doesn't, but this is what's really happening now and how it's going. And of course, one of the really great things that the report has done is that it's helped us get a little bit of a handle on that future crystal ball, because now we have an idea of where absorption is, and we have historical data, which of course is the best indicator of things to come.
Yep.
So in terms of shedding light on what's really happening and sort of giving the data that paints the picture, Craig, what did you find? Well, this year's issue, the main theme was supply shock, right? So walk us through, I guess, what you found to be the biggest takeaway in this year's report.
Well, it's funny, if I may, let me tell you, I was on my children live in New York. They've recently made me a grandfather, so I go to New York quite often to visit them as much as I can.
Congratulations.
Thanks. I have 3 now, 2 grandsons and a granddaughter. Funny how that happens. And my daughter works for Compass up in Manhattan. Okay. So now she's a real estate person. So now we get into conversations about New York versus Miami. And I was telling her how one of the concerns I have about ISG going into the next decade is developers are running out of supply, and that's my business. And I don't know when this thing's going to turn around again. And she said, Dad, that's not true. There's a lot of inventory in Miami. I said, honey, no, that's not true. And so I started walking her through some numbers, and she said, oh my God, that's shocking. So I'm JetBlue on my way back to Fort Lauderdale. I said, you know what, I think I'm gonna call it supply shock, because if it's shocking to my little millennial daughter, maybe it'll be shocking to everybody else when they realize what the real facts are. I guess the main takeaway, as much as people, you know, the realtors that work for Cervera or ISG or other competitors, they're always complaining that they're having a hard time getting South American buyers to make a decision because the dollar is so high. It's been a very aggravating factor. But nobody really looked at how it's affected the developers in Miami and why they've slowed down their plans to build more condos, because they can't the way these things are financed. The current business model requires big deposits before the construction, or at least the commitment of a deposit before the construction loan is closed. And that's just not possible in a high dollar environment, and it's really choked the pipeline of future supply. So I guess there were 2 things I wanted to get across that I finally got across to the folks that work for ISG and related ISG was, you know, we're coming into an era where we've got very, very low developer inventory despite what people are reading, and there's not much in the pipeline coming. So I reflect back on year 2010 and 2011, the buying opportunities that were out there
100%.
were insane. The only regret people have that bought then is they probably wish they bought more. Right. Is the prices were so good.
Totally, yeah.
And I think we're right back in the same spot in 2019. I tried my best to make that point. You're not going to see 2019 again.
I think you made the point beautifully, and I love the fact that the room was packed, so that people were really anxious to get the information. And I'm also very proud of the fact that Miami auto-corrected. It didn't take a crash for people to stop feeding that supply chain, you know, more, until all of a sudden we hit a wall. So this speaks to the high IQ of this town, you know, where they like to think of us as a beach bum town, but really this is a very high IQ town. And so we learned from what happened last time. We adapted a model, so it's a model that protects not only the developers but the buyers, because everybody's buying in.
Yes.
Because like I always remind people in the last cycle, the only people that delivered were the developers. The banks walked away, the buyers walked away, the developers finished their buildings. So in this cycle, no one walked away. The developers finished their buildings and the buyers closed because they had so much skin in the game. And yeah, the banks showed up, they didn't show up, but we know what, it didn't matter because our buyers were prepared to close cash. So if the banks were there, great, it reinforced it. But if they weren't there, what we saw was closings. I'm sure you saw the same thing I did, where at the beginning, if I had 5% mortgages in a building, it was too much. Most of the buyers were closing all cash.
Yes.
And now towards the end, I'm seeing maybe 33% mortgages, but still most of the buyers are closing cash.
Yes.
And defaults, zero.
Zero.
Virtually
zero, maybe
Virtually
1%.
zero. Yeah, maybe 1%.
I mean, I think one of the points you're making, which says so much about the maturity of Miami, there's more equity in residential real estate in Miami than ever, right?
Right, absolutely. And probably then in most, if not all, of the major cities in the United States, because this is a cash-based model.
Yes.
And everywhere else in the United States, people buy with leverage. So that means that we are well more price resistant because people don't have to sell because they're not being strangled by a mortgage. And we have the beautiful scenario where our occupancy continues to be incredibly high. And you remember all the naysayers saying, oh, the rents are going to go down and we're going to have this glut and blah, blah, blah. And I kept saying, I'm just not seeing that. I'm just not seeing it. I'm sure you weren't seeing it.
That was just a few years ago when these condos were just getting finished, like in 15, 16, and 17.
Right.
All these investors are going to put the units in the rental market, watch rents drop.
Right, so watch them go up 4%, which
Yeah.
is what happened in this area, right? The rents went
Yeah.
up 4% in all the central business district, and the occupancy is super high, which supports what you're saying. If we don't start building again, we're not going to have enough housing available for the people that want to live here. And for me, my biggest takeaway from the last cycle, from that time we don't want to remember, is that selling things is important, but that they're occupied is critical.
Yes.
Occupancy is key. That's what drives demand, that's what increases prices, and that's what gets the developers to put a shovel back in the ground. And our occupancy is still incredibly high.
Incredibly high.
Yeah.
Incredibly. By the way, you just gave the other takeaway, which was, given how the pipeline of supply is kind of choked at the moment, with the constant demand that we're getting from literally around the world, we're going to hit a point where we're not going to have enough supply to satisfy all different sectors of the market, particularly when you're in certain areas like Brickell Avenue and Miami Beach. Even out west now, they're starting with the prices in Doral.
You did a beautiful job on the population numbers. I don't know if you have them.
Yeah,
there, Omar,
we were
because
looking
that
at,
was
I think
phenomenal.
it's 900 per day, correct? In Florida is seeing in terms of population growth?
That's I try to explain it. The way that's measured by the Census Bureau, it's not very complicated. It's births, and then they subtract deaths, then they add people moving in, they subtract people moving out, and that equals X. That's your net population gain.
So,
I don't know if I made the point last Wednesday, but that doesn't include second home buyers.
Imagine.
That's just true organic population
people that are
growth
moving here.
moving here every single day. So when you sell a Mexican family a second home, they're not included. A Brazilian family, a New Yorker that's buying a second home, not included.
And by the way, that's at least 50% of our market.
Well,
Those people that
yeah.
are not included.
When I think about the sales I made in May, the month of May, for example, Brickell City Center, 100% second homes.
Right.
100%. No investors, though, by the way. I'm not finding anybody that wants to buy to rent. I'm finding people that want to buy to use.
Right.
So that's very interesting. So second homes or vacation homes not included. We're looking at 902 people per day, Florida population growth, of which 25% is coming to Miami-Dade, 12% coming to Broward, 8% Palm Beach. So very interesting. I think it supports, as you both said, the concept, the idea that the supply is very quickly.
Well, and as supply shrinks, assuming demand stays constant, then I just try to tickle people's imaginations. Where do you think prices are going to go?
Right.
And reach your own conclusion. Whatever conclusion you reach, it's not going to be in red territory. It will be up, up, up. Because that's just simple laws of supply and demand.
And for those of you that love numbers and want to follow along or access the data, we'll have a link to the report in the show notes. You can also find it on, was it ISG World?
ISG World. Yeah, so you can download it and
It's the
as I
2019
said to
Miami
Nuka,
report.
Please use this stuff. I have no illusions that everyone's going to sell it the way I present it. But as long as we're selling Miami with the real facts, then we're kind of more or less kind of resetting the compass.
Yeah.
And that's all I'm hoping that the realtors do. When they're confronted by somebody who said, I read that there's a 5-year supply of whatever, of condos or single-family houses in Miami. No. That might have been true a couple years ago, to be fair. But it's not true in 2019. And the purpose of this is to just is to take the lid off, and
Right.
everyone gets to see what we're really selling in terms of the amount of inventory, and then from there we try to reach conclusions of where we think things are going, particularly in terms of pricing.
I love it. Ladies and gentlemen, once again, you're listening to the Miami Real Estate Podcast. You can find us on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, or MiamiRealEstatePodcast.com. We're breaking down the 2019 Miami report by ISG World. Here for that conversation is Craig Studnicky, principal of ISG World, and Alicia Cervera, Lamadrid, managing partner of Cervera Real Estate. So, ladies and gentlemen, let's continue.
Okay.
So what we're talking about is there's a very limited amount of supply, and if the demand continues, it bodes well for, let's say, all of us in the real estate estate community here in Miami. But let's put some context, maybe, if you will, for those out there listening that aren't as familiar with in terms of the cycles, sort of where we are now, and then what this projection or trend means for what we could expect in the near future if it continues.
Well, I think part of what we were trying to explain in this report is the complexity of this particular market. You have developers actually manipulating velocity, in my opinion, by offering these incentives, discounts on their remaining inventory, or perhaps bonus commissions to real estate brokers to accelerate absorption in a stubbornly high U.S. dollar environment. Now, the reason I find that a bit peculiar is a year from now, they're going to find that they will have succeeded in increasing velocity and winding down with very little inventory in the hopes that they can start the next cycle. So with all of that said, assuming Alicia agrees, I think your 2019 and perhaps bleeding a little bit into next year is the end of this current cycle.
Right. Yeah, I think so. I think we're all pretty much in agreement, just by virtue of the fact that the inventory is absolutely being absorbed.
Mm-hmm.
So in the CBD district, we had like 550 units left. That was like 4 or 5 months ago. I'm sure that that's in the 400s now and
Absolutely.
dropping quickly. Yeah. And I think it's important to point out also that when people read top line, what they're reading is information on the resale market. And that is a very different market.
Yes.
So the resale market is a real thing. It's a fantastic thing, and it will be around forever. And it turns all the time, right? And so there is a reality that there is a lot of product on the resale market. There's also a reality that when you're delivering, as I just did and you did as well, hundreds of units within 2 to 3 years, because that's how long it takes to build these things, they're not going to get absorbed in 2 or 3 minutes. Let's face it, we didn't sell them the first time in 2 or 3 minutes. They weren't built in 2 or 3 minutes. And when the people close on these units, we know that many of them are, as I like to call them, are partners with a developer in the journey of building a building. And so they have many, many exit strategies. They resell, they rent, they use, they do all kinds of things. So there is a lot of inventory that goes on the market. People test the waters. But what's happened here, and that's why we go back to the fundamentals, absorption and occupancy is key. So these units that are counted, many times double counted, because they're on the market for sale, they're on the market for rent, then they get rented, they get taken off the market, and once they're off the market, they're off the market. And that's part of the significance of not having mortgages. Then all of a sudden, these people in South America are getting dollars, with a very strong dollar, every month. They're not so interested in selling these properties anymore.
True. That's so true.
They settle into their rent roll. They're going, there's nothing wrong with this. And by the way, what am I doing with these dollars? Am I taking them back to Venezuela? I don't think so.
I don't think so.
Right?
Or Argentina, where the inflation rate's approaching 50%. No.
No. So I think that people look at this data, and that's why what you do is so fantastic, because you get up there and you not only present the numbers, but you interpret them. And this is what the numbers mean.
Well, I try, because we all know realtors kind of get a little lost in the weeds sometimes, particularly when they're talking to prospective buyers. So we try to make it as crystal clear as possible.
So for our audience, I want them to understand that it's two very different markets, and they both have parallel lives. So there's a hugely important general real estate resale market, as we call it, and that's always going to be going. And as we look at Miami over the years, you know, the line that I always draw, it's not like that. It's like this. But ultimately, it moves up with dips, but it moves up. So when the other day they interviewed me for Mansions, New York, and they said, well, what is it in a buyer's market? How do you do it? I said, you have to be careful, I said, because the market is tipping in a buyer's favor. But if somebody comes in here and thinks they're stealing our town, they're going to walk away with nothing. And if they go in too steep of a discount, they're not going to get the best price, because sellers are going to go, go home. So
to that end, I think I've entertained close to 30 bulk offers at Brickell City Center in the last 12 months.
Yeah.
I can't buy a ham sandwich with the amount of commissions I've made with these conversations.
I know.
Because as Alicia's trying to say, they all come in with these unbelievably unrealistic expectations. And no, you're not going to steal Miami. There's just not that much inventory, nor do you have that kind of desperation with sellers whatsoever. And you just unveiled another very, very big golden nugget. A couple of years ago, particularly when the Brazilian economy started to seriously contract, a lot of Brazilians that bought say in 2012 or 13, they were truly sincere end users. For example, they were going to use them as second homes. Then something happened down in Brazil. I need to sell. So they put them on the market. And even if they put them on the market at the price they paid, given the spread between the dollar and, as an example, the Brazilian real, they could still make money. But they weren't selling so fast. So out of frustration, I think, a lot of those folks decided, you know what, let's take it off the for sale market. We'll rent it. Alicia just made the point. They're getting rent in U.S. dollars. They're enjoying that income. They still own real estate, which only has the promise to appreciate in value. And that's a whole new mindset that we're experiencing in 2019. Because I've noticed, for example, at Brickell City Center, a lot of those sellers or folks from South America that shifted their agenda have reshifted it again, and now they're landlords. They're no longer sellers of real estate, which is another tightening of the supply, the for sale supply in Miami.
One of the phenomena that I'm seeing at ARIA that we closed so successfully, it's a big job,
did
right?
a great job.
647 units.
Yes.
I'm having buyers come back. We had 40 units left, so less than 10%, right? Come back and say, I want another unit. Go figure. How nice is that? How nice is that? Because they're very happy with the product. The building has leased up incredibly quickly. Of course, the rents have gone up, so they're higher than what they were thinking. And they're coming back and they say, we want to buy something else.
By the way, I need to tell you, you're my biggest competition at Brickell City Center is Ari on the Bay.
There you go.
For sure.
we got to keep this going.
No, exactly. Alicia did it to me again. It's really hard to like her. It's really hard.
I love you because you keep our city always going in the right direction. It's easy to love you.
We'll let our audience decide. We'll have links to both properties in the show notes. Okay. You guys can go explore both properties. They're both great. They're both amazing.
I have to tell you, I use Brickell City Center to sell Ari all the time because those shops and the amenity set and everything that's going on there is spectacular.
It really is pretty cool.
So it has been a wonderful addition to our city.
Yeah. They really did transform West Brickell. They did.
Absolutely. And let's touch on appreciation for a second there, because one of the things I love when I'm reading through the Miami report is that there's always these great nuggets, as you say, of pockets of data on different parts of the Why Miami conversation that you can apply depending on whatever you're talking about. And last year, in terms of appreciation, I think, Juan, we'll have to fact check this, but I think I read that in terms of condos built after, was it 1985, appreciation had gone up, I think it was over 220%. In those 25 years.
Let me help you.
Fact check right here.
You're this close. Funny little story. I had the darndest time theming last year's Miami report because we always try to make the next one better than the previous one. It's a bit of a challenge, to say the least. And I was so stuck. And then one day, Miley Aguila, Senior VP of Residential Sales at Swire, she calls me up and said, I just got a call from Hong Kong, and they're asked if you could do a study that shows the appreciation rate of condos over a 25-year period on Brickell Avenue.
There you go.
Perfect.
I said, son of a gun, I think you just gave me the theme of my next Miami report. Because like you're always thinking, driving the car, you're in the shower, wherever you're at a baseball game and you're still thinking about your business all the time. Everybody does that. I think you nailed it, but I'm not going to just do Miami. I'm going to do from Coconut Grove to Fort Lauderdale. So what we found, I forgot 200+% equaled 9% appreciation per year over the last 25 years for all of it. And that included the dip from 08 and 09. And we disclosed it. This thing was going, like the little curve that Alicia just presented, it was up, it was up, it was up. When we got to 08, it went, boom, it went crashing down. And in 09, it kind of hovered down there. But then it slowly went up. And then by 2000, I'm going to guess 14, we hit a whole new high. Wow. But nevertheless, it averaged out at 9% per year over a 25-year period. So yes, what does that say? It says that Miami, like every other city, is going to have their dips. But Miami, unlike most cities, when it recovers, it's usually the first city to ever recover from a real estate recession, and it just seems to have the longer shelf life, if you will. Long story short, it's a good long-term investment. As I've said, if somebody gave me a stock or a bond to buy for my grandkids and said, I guarantee this is going to be 9% over the next 25 years, where do I sign?
Yeah.
No one can give you that kind of a guarantee, but the past is usually a good predictor of what's coming, and that's why we presented that. So the ideas don't always come from me being on a flight from New York to Fort Lauderdale. You never know where you're going to get a good idea. You just got to keep your ears wide open.
I love it. So once again, we're going through the 2019 Miami report, and let's take a quick break for our sponsors, and then we'll come back with some other key takeaways. Okay, we're back. So let's keep this amazing conversation going. Craig, can you tell us a little bit about where, moving into 2019, where the sort of opportunities lie in and around the city?
I have noticed I'll call it a local migration from the beach to, I'll call it the downtown core. I think folks that have been living on Miami Beach for the past 20 or 30 years are realizing that there's a there in downtown now. You put it on the Perez Art Museum, the Frost Science Museum. I don't want to tout my listing too much, but the Brickell City Center and what they've done to revitalize the West Brickell neighborhood. It's easy to live in the Brickell area now, just as an example. And Edgewater is coming right along as well.
Yeah, we have the best shopping. We've got the best restaurants.
The restaurants are nuts. Yes.
Amazing. It's now considered a college town.
Yes.
There's a strong business center. The financial district keeps growing. The medical center keeps growing. And we have great transportation.
Yes.
So, you can get out of your car and walk around. It's now a walkable city.
And isn't that beautiful?
Amazing.
I mean, the downtown core truly is becoming very pedestrian friendly, like New York, like London, like Paris, like some of the most famous cities in the world. So what I'm noticing is that the New Yorkers, call them tax refugees or whatever, they still love the beach because they want the fun and the sun, and the beach is still the beach. It's beautiful. But the livability factor, if that's the right way of putting it, it's coming to the downtown core now. Whether you call it Brickell or downtown Miami or Edgewater, Wynwood, the design district, it's becoming much more livable. At Brickell City Center, for example, I'll tell you, this year I'm having a hard time selling the one bedrooms, but the 2s and 3s are selling very, very
Isn't
well.
that a shift, right?
Yeah, families.
But we're seeing it, right? We're seeing the strollers, we're seeing the joggers, we're seeing the preschools popping up and all of that. And I think it's also a value proposition. I think when you're looking, when we're selling Aston Martin, when people walk into Aston Martin and they think they want to buy the beach, and then they look at what they're getting for about half the price, and sometimes a third of the price,
right?
And they're making the buying decision to come and be on the city side, because they're realizing that if they're really going to spend time here, they may be going to the beach, but they're going to be going out to dinner, shopping, to the theater, to the Heat games, to the concerts more often than they're going to be at the beach.
And the locals have already figured that out, which is why I think that's why I'm seeing the migration from the beach to the urban core. Whoever thought Miami would have an urban core that would be so attractive, but it's happened, and it's happening, and the locals have figured it out more so than the snowbirds.
And we're seeing some of it coming also west to east for the people that are living in some of the suburbs on the city side, because as we've become more urban and they're there, as you said, in downtown is becoming more appealing, people are saying, why am I living 40 minutes away from the action?
Exactly.
And I'm driving in all the time, and not to mention I'm driving in, there's the gas, there's the hassle, there's the parking, and now I'm paying $20-$40 for the parking.
Yeah.
Who needs that? So
living downtown, if it's on a hot day like today, like I Ubered here from Brickell City Center, big $4, but I didn't want to deal with the parking, but I don't have to.
Right.
And the Ubers around almost anywhere in Brickell and downtown,
it's
there's
2 minutes.
Hundreds of them
Yes.
waiting to pick you up.
And the latest addition, and my personal favorite, is now these electric scooters.
Right.
Oh,
You
God,
can
yeah.
basically Uber or Lyft those from anywhere. And
Alicia tried it.
Yeah, I'm going to leave that to you, Omar. And I would not highly recommend that to you. I don't know. I think it's a lot sexier to see you behind a wheel.
Okay. I'm going to take your advice, believe me. I think I'm losing some of my coordinations as I'm getting a bit older.
So the art, culture, education, technology is another booming sector, healthcare, sports and recreation. I mean, Miami really has it all. It's a 365 city, and for good reason. We're seeing in another report, the Wealth Report, which you documented in this year's 2019 Miami report, a big jump. Miami made a big jump here. Let me read a stat here. According to Knight Frank's Wealth Report, Miami is expected to be the fastest growing luxury real estate market in the U.S. and the 5th fastest growing in the world in 2019. I thought that was amazing. I mean, I don't know what you guys think, but tell me sort of about that and what that means for us.
Well, and trust me, that fell in my lap about 3 weeks before we went to print. There's a young woman that's worked for me forever. Her name is Athena Rosano. She does all of our research. And so she sends me this by email one night, and I'm looking at this, I'm reading it. And by the way, Knight Frank really is a big report. Yeah. So she did all the reading, she condensed it down to this. And I actually said, no, I don't believe you. Because I don't see New York and London. Right. And those are the financial capitals of the world, and they will be for as long as we're alive. And so she wrote me back the next morning. She said, no, they're there, but London's number 12 and New York is number 15. Whoa. Okay. I took a back seat, and I'm imagining that the brilliant people that prepare the Knight Frank report know a lot more about what's going on the driving forces that drive the economy and the attractiveness of Miami than even little ISG does with their Miami report. So for sure, we're going to publish this in the Miami report just to give it some gravitas. When I tell you the inventory is going down, demand stays constant, you can expect prices to rise. Knight Frank is kind of spiking the football with an analysis like that.
Yeah. And I think as you look around the world, for both of us that have traveled so much to promote Miami, now we don't need to promote Miami anymore. We go anywhere, and they're asking us about Miami. We're talking about the specifics of the project. The world has changed so much.
Isn't it nice when people ask you where you're from and you say Miami?
Exactly.
Isn't
And
the
they
look
love,
on
and
their
they go,
faces
oh,
like,
you're so lucky, And everybody's, I'm going to Miami. I just came back from Miami.
It's a brand now, right?
It's a total brand now. It is an absolute brand now, and it's a beautiful thing. And one of the things that we haven't mentioned is also how safe our city is.
Yes.
Yes. As you know, I like to wear a little bit of jewelry here and there because I'm a girl, and girls like to do
And
that.
your husband gets in trouble a lot, is what I assume.
Hey, why not? And we can do that still here. So I oftentimes tell people when they're asking me about Miami, I said, listen, the guys get here and they can drive their Ferraris and their Maseratis and park them anywhere, and they don't have to be bulletproof, which means they can actually go at a certain speed. And the women can wear our jewelry. We can hang out and we can do whatever we want. And the kids can ride their bikes and walk places. So I think the fact that Miami's such a safe city is a miraculously fantastic thing. And we think about that a lot traditionally about South America.
Yes.
But Europe is also
It's getting
a little uneasy.
Yes, very much so.
The last time I was in Paris, I had spent a lot of time looking over my shoulder. And when you're in London, you can't help but feel it.
very true.
So
When you walk up the Champs-Élysées in Paris, it's not what it was even 10 years ago.
Absolutely
So you're
not.
always looking over your shoulder.
And Trafalgar Square, they have all of these things. It almost feels like Washington, where you have all of these, public government buildings that are so secure, except for you're around just normal locations. And it's so I think that the security factor in Miami is an important thing. And of course, the security factor in the United States of America is an important thing.
Is big. And I think Americans, what you just said, take it kind of for granted, but the South Americans do not take it for granted.
Not
They
at all.
truly appreciate how incredibly safe it is. I found myself on Saturday night having dinner at Komodo here
Yeah.
on Brickell Avenue. And we finished dinner around 1 in the morning, which is very late for me, but nevertheless, it was one of those unique Saturday nights.
Sounds like fun.
I'm on my way to the parking garage to get my car, and the street is packed
Right.
at 1 a.m.
Yeah.
And that thought hit me. And I ran into these guys that bought a condo from me years and years and years ago. I haven't seen them in a while, just by happenstance.
Yeah.
And we're shooting the breeze
Hanging out.
at 1:30 in the morning on a Sunday, and looking at all of these people walking on Brickell. And I'm not saying you couldn't ever do that. I'm just saying I'm amplifying what Alicia just said. This is such a safe place to live. And even I feel it to some extent. If my daughter lived, or if my grandkids visited me in Brickell, I would have zero concerns. I mean,
Right.
that's pretty much true about all over Miami.
Yeah.
But I think the bigger point is the South Americans truly appreciate it. How many wealthy people there who work really hard for their success have to hide their success down in South America for reasons we all understand. Here they get to enjoy it.
And for as much as we love to complain about the strength of the dollar,
Yeah.
it's great to have a strong dollar, because at the end of the day, at the beginning and at the middle, as I say, it's part of our value proposition that your money is safe here.
Yes.
And so the currencies may go up a little bit, may go down a little bit, but you're not going to experience, reprinting of money because it's gone down by 1,000%, and
No.
we can't.
Yeah.
So that there's a certain element of tranquility in that that I think is important. And one of the realities in South America is that people adjust. There's sticker shock,
Yeah.
and then it becomes a new normal.
Then the new normal
Yeah.
sets in. And I think that's kind of where we
Certainly
are.
in some countries. We were talking
Yeah.
about Mexico earlier, and I think Mexico is the new normal.
For
and then
sure.
it becomes all about choices. Are you going to keep your dollars or your money in Mexican pesos and hope that the peso gets stronger, or are you going to make a move and hope that the American dollar holds its value, and that the real estate here holds its value? So,
And by the time they do all of that math, they still prefer to move their money to Miami. It's always safe in Miami. It's always safe in a dollar-denominated asset like real
Right.
estate.
yeah.
Yeah,
It's safe and it's fun, and they love it all the way around, right?
yeah.
So speaking of dollars and math, as we wind down the conversation, let's take a look at the economic landscape. And I think one of the other interesting points here was in terms of Florida's economy and the largest U.S. economies by state. Florida was at number 17 in the world ranking, right? We were ahead of, if we were a country, we would be ahead of Saudi Arabia, Switzerland,
and
Argentina.
Just to name a few.
Just to name a few. There's more over there. But so, Craig, you had some thoughts off mic before on what this means in the 17 and sort of our 10-year challenge, if you will. Talk to us.
Well,
about
that one stat kind of got away from me before we sent that when we sent that to the printer, because I really don't like putting a stat by itself. It's out of context, so it sounds like we're bragging. So you know that 10-year challenge that Instagram did earlier this year.
Yes.
I want a 10-year challenge on where Florida was 10 years ago. Well, today, if we were a country, we're the 17th most important economy in the world. 10 years ago, you were 52. So when I did my presentation last Wednesday, I said, where do you think we're going to be 10 years from now?
Right.
I don't know. Your guess is as good as mine, but I promise you we're not going to stay at 17. And it's really just another way of letting both the realtors and their clients understand how Florida is clearly growing deep and wide every single day, way past residential real estate.
Right. 100%.
And that's all I'm trying to do is get people to look past real estate for a moment and understand that those kinds of stats supports the underpinning of demand and the attractiveness of what makes this brand that we call Miami.
Yeah.
So that's why that stat's in there.
Yeah, two economic engines. I mean, we talk a lot about the airport and the seaport, and of course now Virgin Transit.
Yeah.
But there's so many
Sir
other
Richard
things that are going.
Branson.
Sir Richard Branson here, and the financial district, which has been so strong for so many years. But it takes a state, and the state is very strong, and it pulls from different parts of the things, and now we have this wonderful migration of Americans that have really discovered what Florida is all about, and we've had the good fortune of having strong government that has protected our state and has made it a rich haven for people that like to not pay more taxes than they need to.
Exactly.
So
Yep.
when you're here, you get all of the services, and you're getting all of that at a much more reasonable number because things are being managed better.
And you get this amazing climate as well. You know, to that point, I always, when I'm about ready to finish these Miami Report presentations, I always like to ask, how many people in this room were born and raised in Miami? And every single time, it's always a safe question because I already know what the answer is.
Yeah.
Less than 5% of the hands go up.
Yeah.
So every one of you moved here at some point in time for your own personal reasons. And those 902 people a day that are moving to Florida have the same reasons, and they keep coming. And what they're finding, as Alicia just said, living in Florida is pretty nice. You save a lot of money on taxes, yes, but the climate here, it just makes you feel alive and happier than you do in other climates. I grew up in New Jersey, and I can promise you the winter is long and cold, and it gets a little dreary. By like January, you still have a few more months to go before spring shows up.
Yeah, now all of our infrastructure has caught up because now we have a great education system. Now we have all the arts. Now we have all the restaurants. We have all the shopping. So our wonderful weather and this beautiful and the clean air and the clean water.
Big, yes.
Yeah, it's huge. Has all kind of completed this package. So it's we're very blessed that now the Americans are coming here, embracing what our city has to offer. And I always like to add that since we all remember arriving here, I think there isn't a more welcoming city in the world.
Oh, God.
We just roll
That's so
out that
true.
red carpet and welcome everybody because A, we need them because they bring wonderful talent and ideas and resources and all kinds of great stuff. And B, because do unto others, right?
Very true. You know, my former partner, Phil Spiegelman, who's now developing multifamily in New Orleans, he always said it's so true that Miami is the nicest place to come home to. You know, think about all those business trips you make to South America or wherever, or I'm up in New York. In New York, I do a lot of Miami Report presentations. When I land in either Miami or Fort Lauderdale International Airport, you walk out the door of that airplane and you feel that balmy air on your face.
Yeah.
Don't you go,
Totally.
no matter what you went through on your business trip, and no matter how tired you may be, you're just so happy to be here.
Well, I would even add before you even get out of the airport in the terminal, when you look out the window as you're approaching right over downtown, just get that sort of,
Feel good.
that feel good, like,
Yeah.
I'm home.
Yeah.
That's true.
So, final thoughts here. Craig, you're a very busy man. Alicia, we got to get you to the airport. You have a vacation to enjoy.
Yeah,
Final
like a
thoughts.
4-day vacation. Please.
4 days.
I'll take it though.
Working hard, playing hard. Final thoughts for our listeners on the report, on Miami, on the future. Take us out of the gate. We'll start with you, Craig.
Well, I guess, look, I tried to make the point last week. You're not going to see 2019 back again. If you've got a client, speaking to the realtors out there, if you have a client that wants to own a condominium almost anywhere in Miami or Fort Lauderdale, you're at the bottom of the curve. The bottom of the curve is called the perigee, and you're there. It's not going to get any better than this, and developers are doing what they can to encourage you to buy now. For the realtors, that's where the big commissions are. That's the good news. Not so much the bad news, but the concern I have is what happens in 12 to 18 months from now when we realize there's really not much inventory out there, and the current financial models that developers need to satisfy their construction lenders to get these buildings built remains stubbornly in place, and the dollar remains high. How soon will we be able to see the return of more cranes in the sky building condos, not multifamily? I don't know. What I do know is right now, what a time to buy real estate in Miami. And it's a win-win for both the brokers as well as the buyers that are moving here. Yeah. So that's my big takeaway.
And that's certainly supported by the number of units that are occupied. The people are actually living there, because it's not just buyers that are coming to South Florida and to Miami, it's also tenants that are coming.
Yes.
So they're going to continue to push this, we don't want to call it a crisis, but we certainly are going to call it a sense of urgency.
Yes.
To start bringing
Nicely
more inventory into the marketplace. So I think the big boys, as I like to call the developers, will figure it out. Mm-hmm. And they'll come up with a model that works, because demand does that.
Yes.
However, even if they wake up and smell the coffee and do that today, we know that there's not going to be product on the market for at least 12 to 24 months, and that's if they're getting it, like hitting it on all cylinders, and that it's not going to be delivered, as you pointed out very well the other day also. It's not 3 years to build these buildings anymore, because now we're going up 60, 70, 80 stories. You know, at Aston Martin, it's a 5-year build.
That's going to be the average life cycle.
That's the average.
Yeah.
So this life cycle gets longer and longer and longer. So it is going to create an increase in pricing. Mm-hmm. For sure. We're going to have a shortage in product available for people that want to rent and move in immediately. And I think it's a great trajectory that Miami's on. And so I always tell people it's always a good time to buy in Miami. Just work with a professional and make sure that you're getting the right advice, because you will find the right opportunity.
You will. What's the old adage? There's two things that are true about residential real estate. There's no such thing as a house with too many closets, and there's no such thing as a perfect time to buy. Eventually, you just gotta measure everything that Alicia and I have been trying to share with your audience today, and then just bust a move. And I'm so encouraging everybody to do it now,
right.
Because by next year, particularly with in this low interest rate environment, next year things are going to change, because things always change, and you'll regret not taking the opportunities that are available right now. Right. We both strongly believe that, whether you're buying, Aston Martin, Ari on the Bay, Brickell City Center, her listings, my listings, it doesn't matter. Buy something.
Right.
Buy something.
Yeah, don't sit on the sidelines. Get in the game.
Get in the game, folks. You heard it here first. The Miami Real Estate Podcast is back. Craig, thank you so much for being here. Alicia, amazing co-pilot. I gotta have bring you back on here more. Next week we're back on Tuesday with Katrina Campins kicking off our How to Be a Top Producer series. Real estate mogul, 1 billion sold plus, and she's got some great insights for you. And then we're back every Tuesday after that with some more amazing content. Ladies and gentlemen, from Miami, where the future is always bright. Thanks for listening.